Oliver Regal Perez says, can you speak to the unfortunate European proclivity towards socialism based on the evolution of European governments from monarchies to democracies? This question goes back to what we talked about earlier, Oliver, and that is that the European democracies and their proclivity towards socialism is not a problem with Europe. It's not a problem with the Europeans. It's not an emotional aberration or anything. That's human nature. You know, socialism is feudalism. Socialism it's feudalism. You've got the masses who essentially have very limited power, who don't own anything, and then you've got the aristocracy that runs everything. And the aristocracy, instead of being the 18th son of the Earl of this, is somebody who got the best test scores and went to a certain university. And mark my words, give socialism long enough, all of these titles will become hereditary. They're hereditary in socialist dictatorships. Look at North Korea. So I don't think that there's a European proclivity towards socialism. I think socialism, bit of an itchy nose today. I think socialism is just the natural outgrowth of the human desire to fear freedom and the human desire for security over freedom. This is the standard default condition, not only of humans, it's the default condition of mammals, at least mammals, and probably all animals, biological life forms. This is why a bear will hang out in a national park and eat garbage instead of walking across the river to get fresh salmon, because it's easier to eat garbage than it is to hunt salmon. The salmon's infinitely better food, but it's easier. All biological creatures are wired to do the easy thing, and it makes perfect sense if you think about it. You know, when you strip out all of the nonsense, what it really comes down to is calories in versus calories out, right? That's what staying alive comes down to. When you really get right down to it, survival comes down to effort to take food in versus calories spent doing it. So if there's a bunch of food lying on the ground and it's crap food, most creatures will eat the crap food rather than spend calories to go and get better food. It's true for bacteria. It's true for bears. True for people, too. So if you give them crap and you make it delivered to their door, people would rather have crap delivered to their door than to go out and work for something nice. It's just that simple. Everybody's that way. All animals that way, or all humans are that way. With the limited exception in a very small number of individuals and with a very small window in history of a self-selected group of Homo sapien freaks who had an open territory and the word got out, and these few people, this small percentage of the total population that has this genetic defect, which is risk-taking, which is a trait expressed on a gene, and my friend Courtney could tell you which gene it was, and on the 7th allele, she'll tell you exactly where it is. But when you have that gene, you would rather risk freedom than take the security. And those freaks got together and created this prosperity engine, this reactor, that's generated prosperity for the whole world. And that's why they hate us, because they don't understand us and they fear us, because we're freaks and we are willing to risk for success. More and more and more, that trait's being bred out of this culture, which is the only culture in the world that was ever built around it. But really, when you get right down to it, Americans are the richest people in the world because we risk security for prosperity. We'll give up security for freedom, and freedom means competition. Competition means prosperity and success. We're Ks. But put RK aside. We are risk takers, and it's in our genetics. And it's... See, the nice thing about saying it's in our genetics is I'm not saying it's in our race. I'm not even saying it's in our culture. I'm saying it's in our genetics. What I'm saying is that there's this risk-taking gene that is found in individuals in Africa, and it's found in individuals in Europe, and it's found in individuals in China, and it's found in individuals in South America. It's found in individuals everywhere. It's expressed in certain ways. It's probably extremely recessive, but it is there everywhere. And when Ronald Reagan talked about all of those lost souls hurtling through the darkness for home, heading towards home, what he's basically saying is this profound idea that we understand to be absolutely true. And that idea is that right at this very moment, there are millions, if not tens, if not hundreds of millions of Americans who happen to be living in other countries because they were born there. But they're Americans. They're as American as any of us, and they need to come home. They need to get over here. They're doing what they can over there, and they need to drop their bags and get over here. The problem is that here we have a large number of people who were born in America who aren't American at all. They don't want to take risks. They don't want to compete. They don't want freedom. They don't want it. They're afraid of it. They need to go over there. Those Americans who were born overseas needs to come over here. Everything be copacetic. If I could trade a liberal professor at a university for an Ethiopian who set up a factory making sandals out of used tires, I would do it every single time. I'd cycle that pump as fast as I could. I'd take every one of them. I'd take every one they had in the store. I'd take the population of the United States. We're 300 million now. I go to 500, 600 million. I go to billion. I go to 2 billion. If every one of them was here to make their own way and not drawing resources from the rest of us. You ever flown over the western United States? There's nothing between Los Angeles, between Riverside, which is pretty damn near desert anyway, between Riverside and St. Louis, there's nothing. There's plenty of room, there's plenty of resources, there's plenty of space, there's plenty of everything. The reason we can't have 200 million immigrants coming into the country is because they would take the resources and they'd get on the welfare and they'd do all that other stuff. But just think if there were another 100 million or 200, what if you doubled the population of America and brought in 300 million of the most motivated, hardworking, selfless people in the world whose only desire was to provide top quality goods and services and reap the profit of it? This country would be a paradise. Paradise. So, for those of you who say we're anti-immigrant, we're not. We love our immigrants. We don't even, I'm speaking for myself again, I don't even consider them immigrants. Somebody who spent their entire life doing the right thing and filling out the forms and standing in line to come here from Hong Kong or Kenya or Ukraine or Bogota, Colombia, they're Americans. They need to come home. But America's an idea. And it's a land of people based on an idea. It's a population selected for that idea. And if they've got that gene going, then trot it out. And I would rather live in an America that was 100% black or 100% Chinese or 100% pick a color. I don't care. East Indian. I would rather live in an America that had 300 million black people in it, and I was the only white person, if every single one of those people had the American attitude of self-reliance, self-respect, hard work, and responsibility. I would so much rather live in an America that had 300 million black people with that attitude than live in an all-white America that had this attitude that we see now among the whitest of white Americans, which are the people in the ivory towers in Harvard University and at MSNBC. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It's all about the attitude. So, moving on. Cindy Lou Sin says, does denim define us as Americans? Can denim unite? Do brand names divide? Cindy, denim does define us as Americans. That kind of goes back to the question I took a few moments ago from about the spaceship trip. You know, it's funny. When I was a kid, I was waiting for my spandex jacket and my flight suit, and I still love wearing a flight suit. By the way, I had a fun weekend down at Flight Deck in a flight sim. I got to wear my own glider pilot flight suit that I haven't worn in 15, 20 years. But I soloed in a flight suit, and I made sure it was gray. It was a gray flight suit because I didn't want anybody to think if I was wearing either tan or sage green. I don't want anybody to think I was trying to be a military pilot. No military pilots in our country use gray, so I wore gray. But I was in a flight suit. And I love flight suits. And I love, there's some pictures of me on Instagram in an actual spacesuit. And I like wearing the spacesuit. And all this stuff is part of my, it's part of my Sid Mead future, right? I want to wear the spandex, and I like looking good in a suit, and I like wearing nice Italian clothes and all this other stuff. But is denim American? You're damn right it is. And that's when I began to realize, I began to have these thoughts that actually America, there is something about Montana, just as an example, right, as a picture. That idea of the most technologically advanced country in the world kind of country that puts flags on the moon, kind of country that flies to Jupiter and Mars and doesn't think anything of it, the kind of country that builds a nuclear rocket in their backyard, puts it into orbit, and then just goes. And yet, those same people don't live in hives or cities. Those people live in places like, I almost said the name of the town in Idaho, which is the most beautiful place I've ever been to in my life, but I'm not going to mention its name because I don't want people to go there. I promised them I wouldn't say. But the idea that you can do these things and still live a life that is in nature, fresh air and outdoors and the sound of rivers. And if you've ever been on a river, and many of you are outdoors a lot more than me, if you've ever been on a river, if you've ever gone down a river in Montana or been to Wyoming or just Dallas or in the desert in Arizona or down the coast of Malibu or whatever, this idea of being outdoors, this idea of being fundamentally rural, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is fascinating to me because when I was in my 20s and 30s and Japan was really starting to rise in the late 70s, 80s, throughout the 80s before they got into their 2-decade-long recession, I remember thinking, look how high-tech Japan is and how cool it is. They have these little hotels that are like little cells and all this other stuff. And I thought, high-tech and it's cool and it's neat and all this space stuff that appealed to me. I realized, wait a minute now. I've been invited to ranches. It's not my property. I've been outdoors in America, in paradise. And you're damn right, denim is American. We should wear our pressure suits when we're at work. We should come home and put on some jeans. And there's another side to the denim too, which is not just the outdoor side. There's also the cool side. I forget who said it. Great thing about watching the show live, folks, is if you're not watching it live, is that if I ask a question live and I don't know the answer, pretty soon it's going to pop up in that question. So I'll say something. It's about a 5-6 second lag for it to get to you. Then somebody does a little research or they already know it and they type it into the comment section, comes back to me, and I have my answer. It's like Brainiac. With appropriate lag for the relays to cycle. Make that same sound that Robbie the Robot makes when he's thinking. So, I forget who said this. It might have, if it wasn't James Dean, it should have been. But somebody once said in a very sneering, condescending way, I'll probably mangle this, that's why it'll be corrected. But some European said in a sneering, kind of condescending way, oh, you Americans, all you're about are motorcycles, hamburgers, and rock and roll. And this guy turned to him, he said, yeah, but what else do you need? That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yep. Motorcycles, rock and roll, and hamburgers. What else do you need? What else do you need, man? And anybody who's ever been on the road, you don't have to be on a motorcycle, but anyone who's ever gone on a road trip knows that it's a three-way combination, right? You're not going to have a sit-down dinner on a road trip when you're out there with the wind in your hair, blowing through the desert at 120 miles an hour, which I would certainly never, ever, ever advise doing because that's against the law. But nevertheless, this idea of being free and having 360 horses behind your carriage means that you're out there, you're going fast, there's nobody around, you're not going to hurt anybody, you're out on a straight line to the horizon, and you are hauling ass, and you're listening to rock and roll music because that music is about freedom and energy and passion and rebellion. It's about F.U. King. That's what rock and roll's about. F.U. authority. So those are the big three, right? Motorcycle, open road, a hamburger, which is a delicious, delicious, delicious top of the food chain food that you can eat with one hand so that the other hand is on the steering wheel. Or if you got a girl in the car, you can steer with your knee. And then finally, you got rock and roll music. And honest to God, I don't know if there's anything better than that. If there is, I haven't found it. Denim, baby. It's what makes us what we are.